Good evening. I'm Neil Best with KUNC. We want to thank you for joining us this evening. The pandemic is impacting all sectors of society, and this evening we're focusing our discussion on the immediate future of our public lands and also trying to consider a little bit what happens beyond the current crisis. Please use the chat function on your screen, whether it be Facebook Live or YouTube, to submit your questions and your comments. We'll try and get to as many questions as we can as the evening goes on in the next 60 minutes. Joining us this evening are Darla Seidels, Superintendent of Rocky Mountain National Park, and Dan Gibbs, the Executive Director of Colorado's Department of Natural Resources. Darla and Dan, thank you for taking time to join us this evening. I know your lives are incredibly busy at this moment, so we appreciate your making the time to be with us. You know, the public lands in Colorado, whether it be the federal level, the state level, county level, or the municipal level, are huge resources which Coloradans, as you well know, clearly love, and we greatly appreciate your taking time to answer some questions this evening. I'd like to start the conversation by asking both of you to tell us a little bit about how you got into what you're doing, what your backgrounds are, and also as we move into a safer at home with fewer restrictions, we're expanding what access might look like. Both of you have made decisions this week to do some opening up. So let's begin by telling us a little bit about yourself and about those actions and how you see things evolving in the weeks ahead. And Darla, if we can, we'll start with you.
Unmute.
There we go.
Excellent, thank you. Very glad to be here with you all this evening. I'm Darla Seidels, and I am the Superintendent of Rocky Mountain National Park. And I got started in the federal government land management agency business through the wonderful Student Conservation Association program right out of college. And so I've been in the federal service now for a little over 30 years, and I've worked with the United States Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management, and the Park Service for the last 23 years. I've been all over the Park Service, from Alaska to Big Bend to Philadelphia to Zion National Park and Saguaro National Park in Tucson, and very happy now to be here at Rocky. I've been here at Rocky for almost 4 years. So in terms of our announcement this week, yes, we were very excited to announce that Rocky Mountain National Park will be opening on May 27th. And so that's going to be a phased approach to opening. Our concern is that we, don't just turn on the faucet and fling the door open so we're completely inundated. So this will be a phased approach to opening where initially, the main park roads are open. And then as future phases go along, we'll start to open some of the campgrounds and some of the other outlying areas.
Dan?
Well, Neil, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be on KUNC, and want to just reach out to the listeners too, to recognize it's definitely very challenging times right now. And I really hope that your loved ones and your family are safe during this really difficult time for everyone. But yeah, I'm Dan Gibbs. I'm the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Natural Resources. We have 6 main divisions that are part of that: Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Colorado Water Conservation Board, Division of Water Resources, State Land Board, Division of Reclamation, Mining and Safety, and also Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. Then we also have Colorado Avalanche Information Center for those backcountry enthusiasts are very familiar with that. And also we have Division of Forestry. I've been in the administration in the governor's cabinet for about 1 year and 4 months. It's been an amazing honor, to say the least, to be in this capacity. Before that, I served as a Summit County Commissioner. I was elected 3 times. I live in Breckenridge. I'm here in my house right now with my wife and 2 little kids that are downstairs right now. And before that, I served in the legislature in both the House and Senate, and really have always been involved with outdoor recreation. I'm a former outdoor adventure guide, taking people on climbing trips and whitewater rafting trips all over the state, and also a certified wildland firefighter. But my big news for you all is that earlier this week, the governor announced that we are opening up camping at our state parks. We have 41 state parks, actually soon 42 state parks, but 37 camping opportunities within our state parks, and really excited to announce that. And then also, and Neil, I don't think you knew I was going to mention this, but today we officially announced we acquired the Fisher's Peak land area in Trinidad, and that will be our 42nd state park. So to coincide with Colorado Public Lands Week, we really wanted to make that official announcement, and that's just going to be an amazing new state park where it's about just amazing property with thousands of acres, and with 9,600 foot peak of Fisher's Peak, right there. So,
well, congratulations on the 42nd park. Let's dive into some listener questions. And Darla, I'm going to come back to you. I mean, you have what, about almost 5 million visitors a year. So not surprising that people, and it's in the backyard from many of our listeners, that they have questions about this. I'm going to combine 2 or 3 different individuals' questions and let you kind of go through some things. John in Fort Collins says, how are you going to restrict the number of people who can visit in the park to maintain social distancing? Given the national parks are federal land and funded with federal taxpayer money, this comes from somebody in Illinois. Given the national parks are federal land and funded with federal taxpayer money, will out-of-state visitors be refused entry or hassled for trying to enter Rocky Mountain National Park? Like so that's from somebody in Illinois. And Diane in Estes Park says, as the park opens and allows 60% of the average amount of cars to enter the park this summer, will satellite parks of the park, such as Lily Lake, Longs Peak, Wild Basin, be a part of the total 60%, or will it be 60% per area? Hikers and climbers who want to start at sunrise or before to avoid inclement weather later in the day, will they be able to get into the park before sunrise? And Highway 34 running through the park over Trail Ridge. How will those only wanting to go the short way be accommodated? Will they be counted as part of the 60%? So a bunch of things for you, Darla, to get us started.
Right, thank you. Okay, so let me just be clear right off the bat that one of your questions referenced a timed permit entry system. That is only a proposal at this point. That decision has not been made. So I want to be very clear about that. That is one of the things we're looking at in order to try and manage the number of people so that we are able to increase access to the park and, simultaneously provide a reasonable opportunity for people to visit safely. So this is a proposal right now. It is not a decision. If that proposal were to be approved, then we would be looking at a timed entry system that would be allowing about 60% of our current maximum visitation. And Neil, as you mentioned, the park is extremely popular. Everyone on this call knows that. We did have 4.6 million people visit the park last year, and that's the 3rd most visited national park in the country. Last year in June and July alone, we had 1.6 million people visit the park. So clearly the crush of visitors, if we were to fling the door open, would be a concern. So this timed permit system would allow us to better manage the flow of visitors and be able to pace them so that they would be able to get an entry permit for any time in a 2-hour block of time. So for example, 6 a.m. to 8 a.m., 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and so on. There would be no reservations outside of the hours of 6 a.m. and 5 p.m. If it goes through. No, there is no intent to restrict the out-of-state visitors at all. We are national parks. We are open to all. And, we very much are a public facing agency. We were established by the by the public, and Rocky Mountain National Park was established in 1915. So 105 years this year that we will have been in existence as a national park, and we welcome everyone, and we want everyone to have that opportunity to visit. So no special preference. Let's see, I'm glad I wrote these questions down because you have
I gave you a list, didn't I?
Yes. Will satellite areas be part of the 60% capacity? Again, if that is approved, yes, the satellite areas would be part of that. And then I've already answered the pre-6 a.m. question. Now, that said, I mentioned that if the permit system is approved, we would not require reservations outside of the 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. However, if we start to see, you know, a huge amount of people that are coming into the park pre-6 a.m., we may need to change that. And I think as we open the park and start to understand what our visitation is going to be this summer, you know, we don't know if it's going to be a huge increase or maybe a decrease because of people's fear to travel a little bit. We need to be flexible and adaptable to adjust to that. And so even with the best laid plans, we've got to be flexible. If we see an area is way overcrowded, you know, we may need to close it for a couple hours or a day or however long it takes to figure out a better strategy to manage it. So the key is flexibility and acknowledging that we may need to make changes kind of midstream. I think I missed the last question there. Did I pretty much capture most of those?
Yeah, I think you did. I think the question was if people just are like needing for business purposes or because they live in Estes Park or Grand Lake, are they part of the 60% or can they say, I'm just driving through, folks?
Right. So our thinking right now around that is we've got what's called a special use permit system in place now, and people can apply for a special use permit if they've got a valid reason. For example, they live in Estes Park and have business reasons over in Grand Lake or something like that. So they would be able to apply for an SUP and have that pass to go through. It would have to be a valid reason, not just a you know, going over for a picnic or something like that. But
yeah,
we have a number of you know, smaller issues that we're trying to work through. We got a number of questions about our proposal for the timed entry when we did a meeting with the Estes Park Town Board a couple of nights ago. We provided a presentation on that, and you know, there were a few questions that we don't have all the answers to quite yet, but as we learn more what the questions are out there, we'll be able to resolve those. Okay,
thank you, Darla. Dan, public radio listeners like to know what's going on and how things get done in your world. How has the process been at the state level in terms of deciding how you're going to, for example, start opening up the campgrounds and stuff? What procedures have you thought about? How do you go about doing this?
Yeah, what's definitely, there's a process that Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, they look at some risk factors. Also, Department of Public Safety is involved as well. But the governor is really looking at criteria when deciding what to potentially open up next. For example, whitewater rafting or other, you know, outdoor recreational type opportunities. So some of the key areas that he's really taking a look at as part of his decision-making process is what level of suppression of the virus has been made to achieve, what's the ability to do testing and containment. Will this decision put vulnerable populations at significantly greater risk? Does our healthcare system have the capacity to handle a surge? And what's the level of risk for societal, economic, psychological reward? And is the policy sustainable? So those are key, you know, elements of some of his decision-making on what is potentially opened up next. As everyone knows, you know, we're in the safer at home executive order right now. We've been in this for about 3 weeks now. We still don't really have data in terms of social distancing and really what the percentage of folks, you know, in the state are continuing to social distance. We know that when we were at the stay-at-home order, it was about an 85% compliance. So we just don't know, what the percentages are at this point. And as we do learn more data, the governor will be able to have, information that he needs to decide what can potentially open up next. So it's definitely not, something that the governor takes lightly. He really works hard with key people, Rachel Herlihy, the state epidemiologist as well, really looking at modeling in the state, what actions you can open up, what risks, are included with folks. So for example, camping, camping's allowed now. We've been telling folks to recreate locally, stay close to home. We really don't want folks that live in Denver, for example, to go to, Highline Lake State Park in Grand Junction. We want folks to look at, recreating at closer state parks. We really want people to stay, more local right now.
If I remember correctly, you've opened up 50% of the camping sites.
Yeah. Right now we're at 50% capacity. Also, if folks are expecting to, go camping soon, it'll be very different. The camp, the more communal areas like playgrounds will be closed. Our bathrooms will be open, but shower facilities will be closed. Cabins will be closed as well. So we're doing really a phased-in approach to see how well it's working. We really expect folks to social distance at the campsites. We don't want to see huge parties or anything. We want families to travel individually and stay within their group. We're trying to urge people to actually plan like you're going to the moon. Believe it or not, be self-sufficient. Gas up before you go. Go to the grocery store closest to your house before you go. We don't want folks traveling, vast distances, going to those local grocery stores, going shopping in areas that they just haven't been in. We really want people to be self-contained to the best of their ability.
So, couple questions kind of related to what we've talked about here. Jill on Facebook says to Darla, how did you choose the 60% number? And let's look at the state level too. How did you decide the 50% level for camping at the state level and just the park entrance for Rocky Mountain National Park? Darla?
Yeah, well, the 60%, we were watching everyone else with all of these new guidelines and the Public Health Service social distancing, and everything we saw was 50%, 50. And so we said, that seems like it might be a little low given that, we're including outlying areas and that sort of thing. So we just tacked on a little bit more percentage to, start with. The idea behind our proposal for a timed entry is that it's managed by rec.gov, recreation.gov, and they have the ability, they do this all over the United States for reservations for public land management agencies. And they've got the ability to be flexible with that. So we start out with that percentage and we monitor it and adjust it. And if that's not working, then they're able to change that percentage based on what we feel like we need to go to.
50%, Dan?
Yeah, part of it is, it's brand spanking new, we want to see how well it's working. And also it's a staffing issue too, just like Darla with Rocky Mountain National Park. This is the time of year you start staffing up. At our state parks, we always have, many seasonals and temporary staff. So we're in the process of staffing up. So, we want to make sure that we have the proper, PPE for our staff. We want to make sure that it's done right. And so we're confident we can increase that percentage, pretty quickly. We really believe that people are going to social distance. And, our state parks, the distance between each campsite, is pretty vast in many cases. In some of our loops, we, for example, only have, 7 campsites, just depending on the state park you're at. So, we want to start out slow and see how it goes.
question I'm just sitting here thinking about every now and then. I hear about people like, I don't want to go to those campsites. It's too civilized. And so I'm just going to go find my own little spot and hang out. I'm state parks and at the Rocky Mountain National Park, I'm sure. You're going to try and police that? How are you going to deal with that? Because I suspect there'll be people that just say, I'll just go off and be by myself. And I presume that creates additional concerns in terms of fire hazards and people, getting lost where they shouldn't be. Thoughts on those? Either one of you.
Yeah, throughout the state, we've, for Forest Service land, dispersed camping has been allowed during this whole time. Their developed sites have been closed, and for the BLM, their camping locations have all been open during this time. So, there are many people that are doing dispersed camping, right now. We really urge them to be responsible, to really look at what the local rules and regulations are. For example, there are many counties around the state of Colorado right now that have camping fire bans. We want people to really take a close look at those rules and regulations. If you're dispersed camping, make sure you bring a camping toilet, for example. We want people to be low impact right now. We really also don't want people to be reckless in the backcountry too. We've seen some examples of people, backcountry skiing and setting off avalanches, and this is not the time for search and rescue teams to head out in the backcountry to save you right now. We want people to be responsible.
Darla, in the park, what's the procedures there?
So we have almost 300 backcountry wilderness campsites available, and those are going to be available this year. So what a fantastic opportunity to get a permit for a site like that and be able to hike into the backcountry or up on top of the Continental Divide and really be able to experience, the amazing place we have here in Colorado and Rocky Mountain National Park, and have that solitude at the same time with your family or yourself or with friends. And so we are definitely excited to be able to offer all of that backcountry wilderness camping, in addition to some of the campgrounds that we're going to have open, or some of the loops in 2 of the campgrounds we're going to have open. And I just wanted to, kind of piggyback on Dan's comment too, with regard to, visitor behavior. Definitely not the year to be trying risky things in the backcountry or with mountaineering, because while we do have staff on, we do have, a limited staff this year. And with the COVID complexities, doing a search and rescue operation, for example, on Longs Peak or one of the other mountains in the park, takes on a much greater risk, because typically those highly technical rescues take more than 10 people. And so if you've got a big group of climbing rangers or some of our partners that assist us from the outside, it increases the risk for them as well. So it's a summer to definitely kind of try to take it easy and stay on the main trails if possible.
Be smart. Drew is excited, wants to get on with the camping. He says, when can I specifically get out and start camping? And he adds, and what are the best ways to reserve camping spots?
Great question. We do have some state parks that are currently open right now, but others, there's more of a phased approach. So take a look at Colorado Parks and Wildlife, their website. There's a reservation. Click on there that you can take a look to see what the availability is for your favorite camping location, around the state. So depending on the location that you'd like to go to, you could go camping tomorrow, for example.
And you're still working on some of those things at the park, or do you feel comfortable at where you're going to be with camping?
So in our, we'll have some loops in our Moraine Park campground and the Glacier Basin campground open, a limited number of loops there. And those will begin operating on June the 4th. So you're able to get campground reservations there. Just go to our official Park Service website, nps.gov/ROMO, to get access to understanding how to make reservations for either the developed campground or for those wilderness campsites that I mentioned.
And Chris in Fort Collins wants to know, will our annual park passes be extended for lost time?
No, not at this time.
Yeah, I don't think so with the National Park Service either, but I don't know that for sure.
Okay, thank you. Barb in Estes Park, we're back to you, Darla. I want to know how Rocky Mountain National Park is working with our hospital and the town and county officials to make the decisions about opening the park. What is the place in our state that warrants reopening the park? What data do we have or will we have on how these decisions are based?
Okay, with regard to working with the town, we've got an excellent relationship with Estes Park Town, and we've got a group that's called the Estes Park Intergovernmental Agency Group. We meet very regularly, and that includes members of the town council, the school system, the Estes Park Health Hospital, the sanitation, wastewater operators, and a whole host of the Chamber of Commerce, Visit Estes Park, etc. And we meet regularly. And like I said, during this COVID outbreak, we've met even more frequently to talk about how can we collaborate? How can we make good decisions together? How do we, it's a very difficult decision, right? To decide, when you're going to open this mammoth, highly visited national park, when you've got part of the population saying, please open right now, and then others saying, please don't open all summer long. And so, we definitely understand everyone's perspectives, whether it's, that you want to be in the park right now, or you're afraid of additional visitation. So we have very frequent conversations amongst all of these partners and kind of talk through it and the pros and the cons and how do we work together. And it's an excellent relationship to try to figure out those things together. In this particular case, kind of based on what Dan was saying, we really paid close attention to the state's safer at home phase. And that's what ultimately kind of drove our decision for that date.
Appreciate that. By the way, reminder to everyone who's watching either on YouTube or on Facebook, there's a chat function on your screen. Feel free to send in your questions or comments. We'll get to as many as we can in the next about 30 minutes. This one is from Sammy on YouTube for you, Dan. Would the state consider requiring quarantine for out-of-state recreationalists like some parts of Utah are doing? And I don't know, maybe, do you know what they're doing in Utah? Maybe you can help us have some context there.
I don't know that, but I do know that the Colorado Tourism Office, right now is really urging folks from out of state to not travel to the state of Colorado right now. We've heard from especially southwest part of the state of Colorado, where a lot of folks are coming up and wanting to mountain bike and recreate. And we really urge folks to stay put, recreate locally and close to where they live and not travel far away. We're urging Coloradans, not to travel to Utah either. So I don't really know exactly what plan they have for quarantine, but again, we urge Coloradans, stay local, recreate local. There's a lot that you can do that's fairly close to your house, hopefully.
Chris on Facebook says, if we already have reservations and if there are problems, I think what he's trying to say is, or he or she is, that if the site is closed due to problems of social distancing, will there be a notification system that says, hey, wait a minute, we had to close this down because people weren't behaving, and before that someone drives from here to there to get to a park? How will those kinds of situations be handled?
Yeah, right now, if you have reservations at a particular park, if you have not received notice, you should plan that's going to be open. The camping opportunities that that we have not had open yet. Those folks have been fully refunded. But right now, if you have reservations at your favorite state park, you should plan on going there if you haven't heard otherwise. When you get there, our staff will be, working with folks that are visiting to make sure they're complying with social distancing rules. We're really optimistic that folks will follow the guidelines. We'll have the guidelines visibly out in front and center so people can see what the expectations and the rules are. This is not the same camping trip that you've done last year. I have to stress to people, this is going to be different. Some of the facilities that used to be open will be closed. So we really want folks to be self-contained. We again don't want folks to go to their to the grocery store of that particular location where they're traveling to, but get everything you need before you leave your house, pretty much, in your general area.
Let me follow up on that. You said you're optimistic, but we've seen the media reports around the country. Target employee, I believe it was, had their arm broken by someone. Someone was shot to death in Michigan over face masking. How worried are you that people, I mean, you said you're optimistic, but we've seen situations, and what are your thoughts, both of you, for your staff moving forward? If you see incidents, could you just say, okay, that's enough, everybody go home?
At the end of the day, we're very fortunate in Colorado. We haven't seen that kind of violence that we've seen in other states. And I expect that we won't see that kind of violence, and especially at our state parks and people recreating. This is a very, very stressful time for people. I'm really happy that the governor's decided, and with the leadership of Dan Prinzel and Parks and Wildlife staff, that we have been able to keep all of our state parks open during this challenging times. And, getting outdoors is so important to people in Colorado, for your mental and physical health. And, we've seen numbers, around the state. I know Darla is going to see, you've seen some historic numbers. We've seen at our state parks, comparing March and April numbers to last year, almost 300,000 people more visit. It's almost like summertime numbers already, and it's barely May. But folks need that outlet. They need to get out. They need to clear their head. They need to go for hiking. They need to go mountain biking. And I think that's great. And I'm not expecting to see any type of that negative behavior at our parks. I'm just not.
Well, we'll keep our fingers crossed here on that. Darla, your thoughts?
Well, so we are also hoping and anticipating that the majority of visitors will be well behaved and respect park rules. However, we have a very professional, trained staff of law enforcement rangers that will be monitoring the situation if there are illegal activities going on. We're not going to be able to be the social distancing police, but we do want to provide people with a reasonable opportunity to have safe access to the park. And so we're prepared, for the worst. If something bad were to happen, like I said, we've got the best trained rangers in the Park Service. And if they need those tools, they've certainly got them. We hope, obviously, that they don't need to use those.
Great. Speaking of staffing at Rocky Mountain National Park, Henry on Facebook asked, will there be enough staff to remove trash and left behind items so that the park is not trashed like during the last federal government shutdown? And I think I could make the editorial comment that you both would like the people to take home what they bring in, right? To make it easier. But how is your staffing looking? You're not going to have probably as much staff as you'd like.
That's correct. Yes, we will have reduced staffing for a couple of different reasons. One is our entrance fees that we collect. They fund many of our seasonals, and as you all know, we've been closed for the last couple of months, so we have not been able to collect fees lately, and not really clear on when we will be able to resume collecting fees, although we are asking to do that because the visitor services that we provide, i.e. the hiking trails and the incredible vistas and experiences, will be available when we open the park. So just by virtue of the fact that we don't have quite the same recreation fee funding, and we've also got some interesting housing challenges this year because we do house typically more than 200 seasonals every year. And this year, because of public health service guidelines, we're not able to put more than one person in a bedroom. So that actually limits the number of people that we can house. And so we are bringing on as many people as we can. We've got an incredible cadre of professional volunteers that we hope to bring on maybe in later stages as well. But that cleaning the restrooms, those are really important jobs and high priorities for us. We feel like, we need to be able to provide those restroom services at the key trailheads and areas. And so making sure we've got the staff to clean those restrooms and make them as safe as possible for the public is definitely a priority. And so that does actually, that staffing right there does limit some of the things we'll be able to keep open.
As a follow-up to that for both of you, this came from YouTube, so I think it's a good follow-up question here. How are the parks planning to conduct contract tracing if an employee or visitor becomes sick with COVID-19, especially with our out-of-state visitors? Is that going to be a role you guys are involved in at all? Is trying to do the contact tracing, excuse me?
Well, for the park, if an employee gets sick, we will ask, obviously, right off the bat, we're asking them not to come in if they don't feel well, even if they don't know what it is. Please stay home, right? So trying to limit that exposure right off the bat before they ever come in. We are recommending staff to take their own temperature every day and monitor that and keep a log of that, a personal log, so that they can be informed of when they might be coming down with any kind of sickness. If they do get sick on the job, then for example, especially park employees who are in housing, we will quarantine them. We've had to set aside a small proportion of housing units that would be available to quarantine those employees. And so, we would take care of them through our typical means of OWCP and that sort of thing if they were to come down with COVID.
Now, neither of you is technically responsible for the National Forest, but Keith on Facebook wants to know more about the National Forest. Will the four-wheel drive roads in Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest be open, and will dispersed camping be permitted in these areas? Can either one of you address that? Have any information?
I don't know about the backcountry roads, but I do know there's no prohibition on dispersed camping right now in the backcountry. I believe Jennifer Eberly, the Region 2 head of the U.S. Forest Service, at the end of the month will give direction to each individual forest on how they look at managing, camping moving forward. But I don't know exactly what that direction will look like. The one thing that's been, really positive during this really challenging times, I don't want to answer for the U.S. Forest Service, but it's been really positive to really communicate. Darla and I, we chatted earlier today, and we chat, we're in communication pretty often now. I'm in touch with the U.S. Forest, the Bureau of Land Management, our county partners. When you look at what decision and actions that we take, whether it's at the state, federal, local level, when you look at outdoor recreation and trails and our forests and so forth, one entity has a huge impact on another entity. So we are communicating all the time. We have weekly meetings with our state and federal partners, and I think that's really positive. My hope and my challenge, I think, moving forward is that we continue this dialogue and communication and partnership, because it's really needed. Most people that travel on hiking trails or mountain bikes, really frankly, a lot of times have no idea if that's a county or town open space or BLM land or US Forest Service land, national park. Well, maybe national park is more defined, but you know what I'm getting at. You know, it's most people don't know the geographical boundaries of outdoor recreation. So it's important that we all collaborate together and really communicate and try to find that sweet spot and how we can work together.
Great. Ginny on Facebook says, I'm an Estes Park resident and wonder if timed entry is not approved, what would Plan B look like for the park?
Well, so for the last 5 years, we have already been restricting access through our most popular areas, the Alpine Visitor Center, the Wild Basin, and Bear Lake. So when those parking lots fill, we're turning people around just like everybody else, right? Across the county parks, the state parks, the Forest Service. And so we would continue to do that, but we would also be looking at metering visitors through our entrance stations to help, you know, something similar to a timed entry, but trying to keep the park from getting overcrowded. So no matter what we end up doing, we've got to come up with a solution to try to prevent the overcrowding. The problem with any other of those solutions is that if we turn them away, like at the entrance gates, they're going to end up in Estes Park or in Grand Lake, and there they will be creating the crowding and the congestion and the problems. And so, you know, we've got 2 wonderful gateway communities at Grand Lake and Estes Park, and we want to be good neighbors and work well together to try to manage this problem, you know, together so that we're not creating an attractive nuisance for them.
Where did I have a question here? Someone was asking. Well, I'm going to jump to this one. You already answered this one, I think, Darla, but somebody may have joined a little bit later on. Casey on YouTube says, is the National Park Service discouraging out-of-state visitors? And that could apply to Rocky Mountain National Park, Yosemite, lots of parks across the country. The answer simply is?
Right. Well, no, we do not discourage, you know, any visitation internationally either. I think to Dan's point, you know, the governor's safer at home order right now is discouraging out-of-state travel to Colorado. So that's one factor. But when we do open up and, you know, when that safer at home order changes, I'm expecting that would change as well. But we're national park, so we are definitely open no matter what state you live in.
Great. Renee on Facebook says, will those of us with lifetime passes to Rocky Mountain National Park also need to reserve a day to hike in advance? Or we need to reserve the day in advance if they want to hike?
Yes, you would. And, you know, I don't think there's really any difference between whether you are, you know, have a Golden Age pass or a life pass or a day pass. It would be the same system for everyone.
One line, 6 to 8, 8 to 10, 10 to 2, or 10 to noon, like that for everybody.
Right. So until 5 o'clock, right?
Well, let's ask this question. And I think it's on the minds of a lot of people. Kim on Facebook says, and I'm going to ask Dan to respond in terms of the state parks as well, but what does Rocky look like after being visitor free for a couple of months? Are there more animals roaming around? Has anything visibly changed? And in some of your more remote parks, Dan, we'd ask the same question. But Darla, are the animals enjoying not having to put up with us?
I'm sure the wildlife is doing just fine on their own. I haven't unfortunately been in the park too much because I'm trying to respect the closure as well as even as an employee. But I know we have very likely experienced some positive readings from our air quality monitoring that we've been conducting for almost 40 years or over 40 years, as well as sound monitoring that we've been doing. We put in some sound monitoring stations up in the Hidden Valley area not long before the closure happened in late March. And so it's going to be interesting to see just the effects of all of that quiet and all of the reduction in cars and all of the other things that potentially cause nitrogen deposition and those things, and see what those air quality levels look like.
Dan?
Yeah, for our Colorado State Parks, we've remained open during this whole time. And so, I just want to thank Colorado Parks and Wildlife staff. You've just done an amazing job to keep these resources open for Coloradans to enjoy. So in terms of wildlife impacts, parks have been busy, even though, the camping opportunities have been closed. I mentioned earlier some of the numbers we've seen, huge increases from last year, around the same time, close to 300,000 people increase in terms of visiting our state parks. On the western slope and the eastern plains, we have seen some increases, but it's really mostly on the Front Range that have really seen the huge spike. So there's really not going to be a change, in terms of impacts to wildlife. Again, people are utilizing the parks.
Okay. Barbara on Facebook says, what if the safer at home order does not change on May 26th? Could that affect the opening of our parks or change anything? Yeah, Dan just said the parks have been open. But Barbara adds, it's still hard to understand how we are being asked to stay close to home, but at the same time opening up parks and camping, which welcome people into the state and into small towns like Estes Park and Grand Lake. Kind of a philosophical question, I guess, for both of you. To competing pressures you have to open up, but we're all supposed to stay safer at home. And you thought about this, right?
Oh, definitely. So when we were looking at the opening date for Rocky, we're taking a lot of different things into consideration. And again, it is a priority for the National Park Service to open and try to be accessible as soon as possible. And so that's when we really started working with Dan and the governor's office to talk about, what does this look like if we choose this expiration date of the safer at home phase as it currently is, and we go with that and it doesn't change. And they felt very comfortable that no matter what phase that the state goes to, that it made reasonable sense for the National Park Service to open. And I know President Trump and the governor and Senator Gardner and the Secretary of Interior had a meeting yesterday, and they did talk a lot about it's great for the national parks to work as closely as possible with the state and the local entities to when we're considering these openings, rather than just a carte blanche, one size fits all for all national parks. So we are trying to be very closely aligned with the state and the local communities.
Dan, are you still there? We just had you go off the screen. So I'm going to look and see if we've lost Dan at some point. We've lost Dan for the moment. So I'm going to watch for him to hopefully pop back in here. Dan, hopefully somebody downstairs, the kids will come up and tell Dad, you're off the screen on this. We'll get back to him as soon as we can. We'll watch for that. Well, Darla, we are coming close to the end of the time. What we really haven't talked about is the future. We're in a pandemic. You're trying to deal with, do we do 60%, 42%, 87%? What do we do now? All these different issues that you're trying to face with. How do we do this with smaller staff? And the list goes on and on. But have you thought about what this might look like 2 or 3 years down the road? What will let's assume that we come out of this in fairly short order within the next year, and there's a vaccine and it's under control. Will it change the way that the parks are on the National Park Service, the way you would run, the way you want to operate Rocky Mountain National Park?
I am an optimist, and I like to look for opportunities for good things coming out of very bad situations. And so one thing I wanted to mention on this call was a group that Rocky Mountain National Park is a part of, and it's called the NOCO Places 2050, Northern Colorado Places 2050. And that's a group of 8 public land management agencies, including the United States Forest Service. That's the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest and Pawnee Grasslands. It includes Rocky. It includes 5 Front Range counties, and it includes Colorado State. And this group formed about a year and a half ago or so, because we were noticing, everyone has noticed that the Front Range population has exploded. I think we're seeing like 50,000 additional residents to Colorado each year over the last 10 years or so. And so, we just recognize that there's this issue of a lot of people that want to come and recreate on public lands, and there is a finite amount of resources in Colorado to recreate in. And so how do we manage recreation management along the Front Range, seeing this huge increase in the demographic as well as visitation? And so this group, has been working on exactly what we're talking about here, recreation management along the Front Range, and looking at various things like how do we be good stewards? How do we continue to be conservationists, and how do we look at it holistically across all of these different public land management agencies. And that is, I think, a common theme that you're going to see more and more, is that shared stewardship across the different agencies. And we got to figure this out together, right? And so there's a lot of tools out there for recreation management, and this proposal that Rocky Mountain National Park has for the timed entry is maybe one good tool. This will be if we're approved to do this, it will be a good kind of experiment to see how something like this works. And so I think, down the road, you'll see more of that kind of collaboration along the Front Range. How can we manage the visitation so that there's continued to be a good equitable access for all, and that we continue to ensure the wildlife's protected, and the mountains and the watersheds and all of those things. So I think it's actually a good opportunity here for us to work more closely together.
Dan, welcome back. We missed you. And it's good to make sure we got our audio going for Dan here as we make sure. Hang on, Dan, we're going to get this back and make sure. Yeah, you should be there with audio. You there, Dan? We need to have you turn on audio right here. I think I can click there. There we go. Now we'll try it again. We're still learning Zoom here, folks. Okay, you're unmuted.
It's showing muted on my screen, Neil, that he's muted.
And I'm showing unmuted here. So Dan, what can we do to get you going here? Oh, wait, there, you should be good now. Give it a try, Dan. Still not there. Well, I don't know if there's anything you can do at that end. I think what we're going to do, we're almost to the end of the hour. And Dan, can you hear what we're saying? Let's see what we can do here. We're going to admit Dan again. Dan, you're back?
Okay.
There we are. Yeah.
Okay, sorry everyone.
Not a problem. Final thought. Darla shared with us kind of her thoughts about we're in the midst of a pandemic. It's easy to just be focused on this week, tomorrow's meetings you have, the crisis for Monday or Saturday. But as you look past the pandemic, let's assume that there's a vaccine in the next 12 to 18 months, and there is a new normal of some sort. Are there lessons that you're learning now that you think will be applicable to our parks and our recreation and our ability to recreate? And I'm turning to you, Dan.
Yeah, in the future, we know a few things, as we plan to deal with the COVID-19 landscape. We are working to collaborate more now than ever with our federal and actually other state partners and local partners. But we know that for folks to get outdoors, it's when there are challenging times, you look to your heart, right? And public lands is just so important. It's part of our fabric of being Coloradans. When I lived in Washington, D.C., it was very different, and here in Colorado, you meet someone and it's like, they ask, what do you do? And they mean like, are you a mountain biker? Are you a hiker? Do you like to fly fish? Do you ski? And so people love to get outdoors. And we know we're seeing about 70 to 80,000 new people moving to the state a year. And we know that they're having impacts on wildlife, on our lands. People love to recreate. So, in the future, as we, I think we need to continue to work together, but we really need to look at big picture, how we manage our lands, how we deal with impacts to wildlife, impacts that recreation has on wildlife and conservation. And we really need to do a better job of really working to collaboratively together on those, huge issues because they collide in many ways. And, the state, will definitely be a force in some of those discussions, moving forward as we collaborate and trying to find that balance between how we protect our lands, how we provide recreational access for people that everyone just loves, and how we make sure that we manage our lands in a sustainable way, that my little kids that are 2 and 5, have the same opportunities that I've had, as a Coloradan, and I want their kids too, if they have kids, to have the same great opportunities to enjoy the outdoors and see, moose that we have right outside our doorstep, right here out of my house in Breckenridge. So I think those are some of the bigger challenges that we have before us, is how to manage growth as it relates to conservation and recreation.
Well, I want to thank both of you so very much. Our thanks to Dan Gibbs, Executive Director of Colorado's Department of Natural Resources, and Darla Seidel, Superintendent of Rocky Mountain National Park. We thank you so much for sharing time with us during what's an incredibly busy time for you. I know 7 days a week. We also take a moment to thank our partners at the Keystone Policy Center, an independent nonprofit organization. Keystone works in partnership with land managers, stakeholders, and communities in Colorado and beyond to create public land solutions to address human population growth, recreational demands, changing climate, and other ecosystem stressors. You can learn more about Keystone's work on public lands issues at keystone.org. And most importantly, I'd like to thank the members of KUNC. All that we do is made possible by our members, and we thank our members for making this opportunity possible this evening. Executive producer for this evening is Robert Leisha, production assistant provided by Daniel Hastings. On behalf of all of us at KUNC, I'm Neil Best. Thank you for joining us, and do be safe, stay well, and get out and recreate, but do it safely and fairly close to home. Good night, everybody.
Good night,
Good night.
thanks.
Thank you.